I'd first heard the following tale when I was very young, and I have to say it was one that kind of spooked me. But it's a story that perfectly combines horror, mystery, and the unknown. The year is 1874 in the leafy English county of Surrey. And two gentlemen are enjoying the pleasantries of an after-dinner chat. The neighbours, socialite Augustus Hare and a certain Captain Edward Fisher Roe, are deep in discussion. They share anecdotes and chat about politics and local issues. Then, the conversation drifts onto more unusual topics. You see, after moving down to Surrey, the Fisher Roes had rented out their old country home called Croglin Grange, and one of the new occupants, a young female, endured something that was an absolutely petrifying ordeal. Augustus Hare was captivated, and Fisher Roe continued. The new tenants of Croglin Grange were the Cranswells, 3 adult siblings, Edward, Michael, and their sister Amelia, and it seemed like the perfect location for them. Winter and spring came and went, and life in Croglin Grange was nothing short of idyllic. And the summer had brought with it some unusually balmy conditions. And yeah, it certainly was hot. And the brothers could do nothing more than lounge under trees, sipping drinks and leisurely reading books. Amelia did much the same, only she spent time on the big open veranda of the house. After dinner, the 3 siblings sat together, appreciating the evening's slightly cooler air. Looking out over the grounds, they enjoyed the view of the sun slowly setting behind a band of trees that separated the Grange from an adjacent churchyard. It was getting late, and the Cranswells soon retired for the night. But it was so warm. Amelia, alone in her bedroom, just couldn't drop off to sleep. She got out of bed, wandered over to the window, and just looked out over the grounds and to where the tree line was. And then, what was that? At first it was subtle, a slight flicker of something in the shadows. Perhaps a branch moving in the wind? But no, it couldn't be that. It was a hot, still summer night. And then it happened again. What was this? Amelia could make out the silhouette of a figure. And it was shuffling in a low, shambling walk, and it seemed to be walking in the direction of the house. It got closer and closer. Amelia dashed to her bedroom door, but she fumbled the key in the lock when suddenly she heard. Slowly looking over her shoulder and towards the window, there, staring straight back at her, was a monstrous human-like being with a withered, brown, leathery face. She was paralyzed with fright. And then she realized that whatever it was picking at the lead seams of the window. A strange, withered-looking hand reached through, grabbed hold of the latch and turned it, and whatever it was entered the room. Before she could react, it attacked, grabbing at Amelia's hair, pulling her head to one side, and plunged its teeth into her neck. Startled, Edward and Michael sprinted down the dimly lit corridor of the house and to her door. Finding it locked, they searched for something to lever it open. Barging their way into the room, a figure disappeared through the window. Their sister, draped over the side of the bed, lay unconscious, bleeding from the neck. From the window, they could see the creature scurrying across the lawn with gigantic strides and vanishing over the churchyard wall. It was gone. In the days that followed, the brothers stayed close to Amelia. The wound on her neck began to heal, and the village doctor visited the house. He insisted that for her to fully recover, she needed a change of scenery. But yet there was no mention of who or what was behind this attack, and no mention of involving the local police. Just get her away, he said. That's what your sister needs. That was it then. Doctor's orders. The Cranswells were soon en route to Switzerland. Clean mountain air would do their sister the world of good. Summertime in the Swiss Alps passed by quickly, and Amelia felt refreshed and really starting to feel more like her old self. And in a weird way, she was longing to go back to Croglin Grange. You see, in her mind, the attacker was some kind of escaped lunatic, and there was just no way that somebody like that would still be roaming free around the area of Croglin. It had to be safe to go back. And there was also the matter of their lease. They had agreed on a 7-year stay and had only been there for 1 year. And indeed the brothers were also missing their life at Croglin. Convincing Edward and Michael it was time, the siblings agreed to return. However, there was one condition. Edward and Michael would stay in a room opposite Amelia's bedroom. They would stay close, and they would keep loaded pistols by their bedsides. Amelia was fine with that, and the three headed back. The siblings spent a happy and uneventful winter at the Grange, though they did hear some disturbing reports of animals being found dead, with gashes in their throats. Then, one spring night, an ominously familiar noise woke Amelia up. She looked up and saw the same hideous shriveled face she'd seen the previous summer. Her brothers leapt from their beds and were soon charging out of the front door of the house, clutching their pistols. The creature bolted across the lawn, scampering in its ungainly stride. One of the brothers fired, hitting it in the leg. Though limping, the creature kept up its run and clambered over the wall into the churchyard. Although it was too dark to make out much, the brothers thought they could see it disappearing into a crypt. They stopped chasing. They had no intention of entering the churchyard now. They were going to go back to Amelia, but they would be back. The following day, the brothers assembled a band of men from the village, some of whom seemed a little less surprised by their story, as if they were expecting it. The brothers told them of the churchyard and the particular crypt. All the men were immediately in. It seemed as if this was the information they'd been waiting for as well. In the churchyard, they got to the vault. Breaking open the doors, they were confronted by the sight of shattered coffins and mangled human remains strewn across the ground. Just one casket was reasonably intact. Its lid, although not attached to the rest of the coffin, lay on top of it loosely. The lid was shifted to one side to reveal a withered, mummified creature similar to the one they'd chased. And there was a telltale pistol wound in its leg. The villagers knew there was only one way to destroy the creature. The brothers, they just followed. They dragged the hideous corpse out of the crypt and into the churchyard, torches lit, and using the branches of a holly tree, they set the thing on fire. And this was the end of the Croglin vampire. So was this really just a tall tale? Had Captain Fisher-Roe just wanted to give Augustus Hare a scare? Well, it certainly did inspire him. In an autobiography in the late 1890s, Hare was to retell the story of the Croglin vampire. Not long later, A chap by the name of Montague Summers, a highly eccentric character who posed as a Catholic priest, though there's no firm evidence he was ever ordained, was an individual obsessed with witchcraft, vampires, and werewolves. He revealed the similarities between Hare's account and a story published in the 1840s called Varney the Vampire, a fictional story. Another researcher, a certain Charles G. Harper, wrote in a book from 1907 that he'd found no evidence Croglin Grange had even existed. Yet he did stumble across two particular buildings, Croglin High Hall and Croglin Low Hall, but neither really matched Hare's depiction of Croglin Grange. Also, rather than having a spooky churchyard nestled in an adjacent hollow, Croglin Low Hall is around a mile from the nearest place of worship, St. John the Baptist Church in the village of Croglin. Fast forward to 1963, and another researcher, Francis Clive Ross, stated he discovered information that might lend some truth to the setting of Fisher's tale. He discovered that Croglin Low Hall had actually been known as Croglin Grange until the beginning of the 18th century. A chapel had also stood nearby, which Clive Ross felt had been demolished around the time of the English Civil War between 1642 and 1651. He discovered the stubs of its walls and evidence of its foundations. And it must also be noted that on the Historic England's webpage that this chapel is also mentioned, but states it was knocked down in the 19th century. Clive Ross found that the vampire story indeed seemed to be a long-standing legend in the Fisher Row family. However, having talked with Croglin residents, they told him that the incident didn't happen in the 1870s, but actually 200 years prior. Then later, in the book Haunted Churches and Abbeys of Britain, the author Mark Alexander stated he'd unearthed an account from a former Croglin rector, the Reverend Dr. Matthew Roberts. Roberts had linked a series of vampire attacks to sightings of a bat-like creature in the Croglin churchyard. Among the victims of this flying fiend was the daughter of one of Roberts' predecessors, the Reverend Joseph Island, who'd officiated at Croglin from 1804 to 1837. During the assault on Miss Island, as was the case with the Croglin vampire story, the creature was wounded and escaped to a tomb in the churchyard. And Roberts claimed that the creature escaped to the tomb of a certain Reverend George Sanderson, who'd served in Croglin in the 17th century. And local rumour asserted that the bat had appeared from Sanderson's grave before other vampiric incidents. So there you go. Different accounts, different researchers. Is the Croglin vampire just a tall tale? Or is it based on some kind of factual moment in history? Surely it couldn't have been a remnant of ancient evil. Perhaps it was something else, something more rational. A madman, perhaps, who had taken to hiding in the graveyard and attacking the Grange in search of blood. The true answer may never be known. But the vampire, or whatever it was, seems to have disappeared. But the house remains, and the shadow of the unknown still lingers. The story of the Vampire of Croglin Grange remains one of the most chilling tales in English folklore. A tale of darkness, terror, and the unknown. Whether a vampire or a madman, it's a story that continues to haunt the land and captures the imagination of all those who dare to listen.